Lucy, you staying or are you just stretching? You're staying? Okay, sweet. All right. All right, morning, everybody. Morning. I know some of you have done the workout today, so hello again. So I did this lecture back in January, just after we opened. I just realized that we hadn't done it for a while, but obviously our member base has grown since then. So wanted to give you guys an opportunity to ask any questions, because obviously you're here in person. But for those that are consistently doing CrossFit classes, High Rocks classes in particular, to try and understand the methodology that we follow, essentially, and that there is some thought behind what we do. It's not just completely random and completely varied. So I wanted to kind of take you back on the history of CrossFit to start with. Primarily, this will be based off of CrossFit, and then you've had other fitness races like High Rocks that have evolved from that and really grown in popularity. But to help you understand why there was a surgence of essentially functional movements. If you were to have gone to the gym in like the 1980s, 90s, it was either bodybuilding or some form of cardio that you did. It was very rare to find people mash those together into a 20, 30, 60-minute workout. It was, I train bodybuilding for strength, I run for the cardiovascular aspect, but the combination of the two didn't really exist until CrossFit came around. So what I'm going to do is take you through kind of the history of it very briefly, then talk about some of the science of it as well. And that, again, there are ways in which you can measure your fitness. And that's what you'll hopefully take away today, is that we ask you to record things on your app. That is you measuring your health and fitness in some way. We also have the InBody scanner, which starts to measure your metrics as well. And then you have a tangible number or statistic or something that shows you whether you are improving your health or not. Is that recording, Georgie? Just so I know. Yeah, perfect. So what we're going to kind of look through today, some of this sounds really morbid, but want to understand the bigger picture aspect, okay? I'm immensely passionate about CrossFit as a methodology, and I'm sure that that will come across as I talk to you through things. We'll look at the definition of fitness, what that then means in terms of the scientific aspect, and then we'll start to look at the bigger impact, how that impacts you as you age, essentially. And that's where we'll start to look at your sickness, wellness, fitness continuum, and essentially you all fit onto that continuum in various different ways. And then the morbid aspect of 5 buckets of death, okay, which will come through later. So what is CrossFit? CrossFit is defined as constantly varied, high intensity, functional movement. So what we essentially mean here is that we are looking for you to do a huge variety of different movements: a pull, push, hinge, carry, climb, whatever it might be. All of those things that you might do on a day-to-day basis, or when you're put into emergency scenarios, you know you can do, okay? We look for those to be at a high intensity that is relative to your fitness level at that time, okay? So we look for you to get your heart rate up, find something that is challenging, because ultimately that is where you're going to create adaptation. And the constantly varied aspects means that it's not the same thing that you're doing over and over again. So you're not becoming a specialist in anything. CrossFitters, particularly at elite levels, will never be the best weightlifter in the world. They'll never be the best marathon runner in the world. You've seen a sub 2-hour marathon just completed. A CrossFitter is never going to do that. And that's because they're generalists. They're not training for one particular thing. So our goal is to kind of take a fast run pace, but I can still lift a heavy weight at the same time. I can still do a high skill gymnastics piece at the same time, so that you're getting kind of good at a broad aspects of different things rather than just specifically being good at one or two things. Now, if you want to get really good at one particular sport, you are going to have to be less of a generalist. You're going to have to really specify towards that sport. So if you want to aim for a sub 2-hour marathon, doing CrossFit is not what you should be doing, because it's never going to get you there. It might help improve your cardiovascular fitness to a point, but at some point you're going to have to make that shift, and you're going to have to specialize in running alone and get really good at that in order to try and achieve whatever that goal is that you have there. The functional movement aspect looks at multi-joint movements, so not isolated bicep curls and things like that, because we find that they don't apply to real life. So picking up a sandbag, a bag of soil, whatever it might be. These kind of things are often multi-joint movements where they incorporate your hips, your knees, primarily, mostly at the same time. And we want to make sure that we teach you to do those things safely. So this is the combination of these three things is what CrossFit is made up of. And that's why it's not necessarily random and not necessarily random exercises that are picked out of the sky. Now, it was, this is kind of fitness in 100 words. The CrossFit has a hierarchy, a pyramid, if you like, and nutrition is the first part of that. So our nutrition prescription is relatively simple. And if you can follow this for 80% of your diet, you'll probably have a lot of success in your in-body scan. So that's essentially eat meat, vegetables, nuts and seeds, some fruit, little starch, and no sugar. What we mean by this, I'm not going to go into nutrition on loads of detail, but essentially, meat doesn't necessarily have to be meat, okay? What we're looking at here is protein intake. You want to eat protein, okay? It's a vital part of your nutrition. So if you are a vegan or vegetarian, you'll need to make sure that you're still getting high protein options of that, whether that's supplementation or edamame beans, tofu, whatever it might be. Protein intake needs to be high. By vegetables, we mean vitamins and minerals. You need them to survive. You need a variety of them as well. So if you're someone that always goes for just green beans and broccoli, you're actually limiting yourself to only the vitamins and minerals that they provide. Nature has a wonderful way of making different foods different colors, and they actually then contain different vitamins and minerals within them. So if you can create a food plate that varies in color, you'll actually be getting various different vitamins and minerals when you eat. Nuts and seeds is our healthy fats. Fats are vital for life, particularly for things like hormonal function. So getting things like your nuts and your seeds in are super important. This is where your battered foods and things like that shouldn't come in. Our healthy fats should come from nuts and seeds rather than vegetable oils and things like that. Some fruits, the reason that we ask you to restrict fruit is because it is also high in sugar at times. So you want to make sure that most of your carbohydrates come from vegetables here and not from a fruit source. Now, when you have a higher level of training, you can increase the amount of sugar you consume because the likelihood is that you're going to be burning it off when you train. But you can get really specific with the timings that you then eat those higher sugar foods. Little starch means you're slow releasing carbohydrates essentially. So things like your oats, your potatoes, whatever it might be, that is a starchy carbohydrate. These are typically slow releasing and you'll have a small amount of it dependent on your training volume. So if you do hyroxes, you'll probably actually need a lot more carbohydrates than if you just did a slow, steady walk every day, okay? So for someone that is actually an untrained individual, the likelihood is you could get away with having none of this because you don't do any training. So most of your carbohydrates would come from fruit and vegetables. You don't need pasta, rice, potatoes, and things like that as part of your daily diet because you're not training. If you're training, you're going to need some form of higher carbohydrate food in order to fuel you. And no sugar. That's a pretty self-explanatory one. It just means limit your processed foods, essentially. So if you can prioritize everything that comes before it, the sugar is then a treat. That's the other 20% that I would kind of look at. But if you were eating super clean, we would really limit your sugar consumption. Does that make sense? The second part, keeping your intakes to levels that will support your exercise, your movement, rather than your body fat, that's talking about your calorie amount. And that's where your in-body scan can really guide you. You have something called a basal metabolic rate on your scanner. We would then look at what your exercise level is on top of that, and that can help us guide you with what your calorie consumption should be. It is going to be different for everybody based on your muscle mass, your metabolic rate, etc. Okay, so that's kind of our nutrition prescription. This is where we're looking at your varied exercises. Like I said, deadlifts, clean, squats, presses, clean and jerks, snatches. That is hinge, push, pull, all of that kind of stuff, okay, but with specific exercises in mind. Master the basics of gymnastics. This means understand how your body moves through space, okay? Can you control your own body weight? If we were to take that all the way back to a 90-year-old that struggles to walk, gymnastics is what we're talking about. Can they walk without aid? So mastering their levels of body weight control is vital to maintain their health and their fitness. This is our cardiovascular work. So our monostructural exercise, bike, run, swim, all of that kind of stuff. And then we want to try and do that in combinations of 5 or 6 days, mixed however you like, and randomized. So trying not to get into an easy training pattern. So can you vary the times that you train, the days that you train, the altitudes that you train at, all of these kind of things, the temperature that you train at, which we naturally do anyway. But all of these kind of things will actually help to kind of throw your body off and make you fitter over time. Your body doesn't like routine. Routine is the enemy, okay? As it says there. We want to try and keep our workouts short and intense, so that's the high intensity piece. But there is an application for the long, slow, steady stuff if you are trying to build things like your VO2 max, burn some body fat, etc. But if we are talking about long-term health, fitness, and improving your strength, we want some intensity into your training. Turning up and just going zone 2 for everything you do is not going to be enough to help you build your muscle mass as you age. That's okay. And then regularly learn and play new sports. This is your practical application. So it doesn't mean that you have to suddenly take up lacrosse tomorrow. Okay. What we're talking about here is somebody throws you a ball. Can you throw it back? Do you have just that natural ability to apply what you do into day-to-day sports? If you notice that your bus is coming and you're 50 meters away from the stop, can you run to the bus stop without thinking, right, I need to stretch first before I do this because I'm going to get injured? It's that practical application. Everything that you learn in the training that you do, can you then apply that to your day-to-day life? I'm going to keep track of time. Any questions so far? 100 words, pretty simple prescription for what we end up looking for. Now, a very quick history. So Greg Glassman was the founder of CrossFit. He started training back in 1974. The first CrossFit gym didn't open until 1995, run by him, and it was in the corner of a gym. He hired a small piece of a karate studio, and eventually all the members were moving from the karate stuff and getting fascinated by what was going on in the corner, and he got kicked out. They didn't like what he was doing because he was taking business for people that loved what he wanted to preach. And so he opened up his first CrossFit gym, which was in Santa Cruz. The second CrossFit affiliate opened in 2002. And I remember watching a lecture that he did where he talks about, oh, this is freaking cool. Maybe I'm going to have a CrossFit North, South, East, and West one day. There'll be 5 of them. And now we actually have about 14,000 affiliates worldwide. At its peak, just before COVID, there were about 16,000. And then after COVID, numbers actually started to come down slightly, but then there's been a bit of a resurgence where numbers start to climb. There's various different reasons for why that is, but media team is kind of my view on that. When they changed and got rid of the media team, the number of participants started to decline. And so we're actually starting to see a bit more of a resurgence, particularly in things like the CrossFit numbers and participant numbers over time. And I certainly feel like they've really improved their marketing and their message to people as well, showing that CrossFit's not necessarily for elite level athletes, that it is for people like us, the general public. And that's hopefully what lectures like this can really put forward. So let's define it. Defining fitness. Now, before CrossFit, there was no definition. The definitions were really fluffy. They were kind of things that weren't actually measurable. They're around things like your holistic health, how you feel, your wellness, but there was nothing tangible that you could actually measure. And Greg Glassman firmly believed that how can you possibly define something if you can't measure it? So we needed a definition that meant that fitness was an actual measurable thing. So Work capacity over broad time and modal domains. We're going to come on to what that means, but essentially our work is calculated by your force multiplied by the distance that you carry that or move that, divided by the time that it takes you to do it. So if me, a roughly 90 kilo guy, that is my force. I run 100 meters, that is my distance. It took me 10 seconds, that's a lie. But if it took me 10 seconds, that would equal the work that I did, okay? We'll come on to our power output later, but essentially we then take the amount of work that I did, we look at dividing that by time once again, and that's then gonna be your power. So we essentially would work out either your power output per second, per minute, per 10 minutes, whatever it might be, and then we can plot that on a chart. When we come to the different energy systems that we use, you'll start to understand how this applies to your classes. When we do things like a 5-minute workout, a 15-minute workout, a 35-minute workout, we have Murph on Bank Holiday Monday, which is for some people a 65-minute workout. All of those things can be plotted on a graph, and you essentially start to work out where your holes are in your own fitness, but also what your fitness looks like if you were to graph every single thing that you did. So therefore, we have a measurable means of looking at your fitness, your work capacity over broad time and modal domains. If I come back to this, that is essentially your work. Broad time means 60 seconds, 15 minutes, 35 minutes, 60 minutes, 4.5 hours, whatever it might be. And modal domains means it's not run, 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 run. It is squat, snatch, run, swim, row, dumbbell thruster, whatever it might be. Anything that I throw at you, that essentially will then be measuring your fitness over time. I think I'd come on to this later, but the original CrossFit workouts for the games were done using a hopper. And a hopper was essentially sticking loads of exercises into this thing, turn it, pull an exercise out, and we're going to do that. So it was completely random. They stuck every single exercise they could possibly think of into this hopper, turn it, pull it out, that's what we're going to do. And that's how they kind of programmed the original games. So it was testing fitness based off a completely random level of exercise. Now there is a bit more thought into that over how much squatting are we doing, how much hinging, pulling, pushing, so that we can measure fitness for people of all abilities. So even at previous games, we've had a half marathon row as well as a 1 rep max back squat. So we're measuring fitness on 2 very different style workouts. Any questions? None whatsoever. Okay, cool. I'll continue on. So we are measuring 10 general physical skills, and some of these are developed through practice. There are no magical things that we can give you in order for you to develop these things. You need to go and put the time in and the effort in to practice them. Some of them are developed through your training, so often require an external object or a particular focus. So cardiovascular endurance, that's primarily going to be your monostructural work. Run, swim, bike, whatever it might be, walk, climb, etc. That measures nicely into your stamina as well, your ability to do that over a long period of time. Then strength, your ability to lift a load, okay? So the amount of weight that you can deadlift, squat, even bicep curl, clean, whatever it might be. Flexibility, we're kind of looking at range of motion here. Can you squat to depth? If I ask you to bend over and touch your toes, can you do it without making a noise? Yeah? Those are the kind of things that we need to train you, okay? We need to try and find an improvement in that. So if I hinge over and try and touch my toes, that might not be enough to try and make improvement over time. We're going to have to try and find ways to improve that through training and improving it. Now, for accuracy, coordination, balance, and agility, these are done through practice, okay? They're actually more neurological skills instead. So standing on one foot, I'm developing my balance here. If you're really wobbly, the more that you try and do it, the better it will get. You are learning from that repetitive exercise. So it is neurological. not a physiological adaptation. Often what we would see with these top ones is you see a change in muscle tissue. So the length of your muscle, the strength of your muscle. You actually see a physiological change in your body. If you suddenly get abs, it's because you might have developed one of these, not because you can now balance on one foot. Okay? So these are neurological. Then we look at a combination. Your power, come on to the calculation later, but that's developed through both. You need a bit of practice, you need your training. Same for your speed, okay? It's not necessarily just in your head, okay? Some of it is to do with your agility, your ability to change direction, but also you still need to be stronger. Typically, we would see people that have a large squat number are better sprinters. So if you wanted to get better at your sprinting, I'm not just going to tell you to sprint all the time. We need stronger legs. So we're going to have to train that. Okay, so it's neurological and training based. Okay, now we're going to move on to the pathways. This is where we can map this on a chart if I have my colors. Again, any questions on our 10 physical skills? No? Okay, so 3 primary energy systems that we use when we train. Your phosphagen system is going to be essentially an explosive energy system, okay? Doesn't use oxygen. It is really short-lived, about 10 seconds max for most people. So what we would typically see is this. It is high power, but short time, like so, okay? Your 100-meter sprint at elite level, for most of us, 40-meter sprint, yeah? It's going to be very short. It's very explosive. Heart rate jacks right up, comes straight back down, okay? Glycolytic pathway, if we're looking at your workouts, this is more your Fran. So 21, 15, 9, a workout that is 3 to 5 minutes in length will prioritize this energy system. If we come back to that running option, it's about 400-meter run. Now, if we were to take a 400-meter run time and look at how fast did they run in the 100 meters, the likelihood is they'll be a fraction slower. So their power output is actually slightly less. So start time is the same. It comes up and then starts to come down a little bit more over time. So the time is still relatively short. Power output's a little bit less, but now what we're starting to do is push the kind of time frames that we use into longer modalities. So we have a 10-second bout of exercise. We have a 2-3 minute bout of exercise. And then anything that's past that is our oxidative system. So your body starts to utilize oxygen to create energy, and that keeps you going for longer. But what we would start to see here is that you either start to build up in lactate, and that's what slows you down. You just cannot move any longer because your oxygen isn't breaking down that lactic acid as efficiently as it should. So we would kind of call that your lactate threshold. That builds up so much that you just can't run any longer. Or there'd actually just be a depletion in things like carbohydrates, body fat. So we would look at that being called kind of hitting the wall, and more common with longer bout exercise. You run for 2 hours and you physically cannot do any more. Your body will just not let you do it. There is a depletion of energy, okay? And you therefore are stopped physiologically. Now, these exercises will be much lower in power output, okay? And much longer over time. So what we would typically see is that kind of curve, there or thereabouts. And this can go on and on and on and on, depending on what the training is, what your experience is, and that's your kind of endurance training. Does that make sense? We have our explosive, slightly shorter durations and long durations. Now, I'm going to ruin my chart by explaining that when we do this, have I got this on the next one? No, I'm going to explain this now. So now what we're looking at is the amount of power that we do. So your work capacity, your ability to do work over a certain time frame. Now what we would typically see is something like your back squat, 1 rep max. How long does it take you to do 1 squat? 3 seconds, something like that. So that's going to be up here. It's high power relative to you. It's high power, but it's really short-lived. Then I ask you to do 10 deadlifts, probably going to be much longer in time. Let's say 12, 14 seconds, but lower in power. I ask you to do Fran. Your Fran time is 5, 10 minutes, so 21, 15, 9 pull-ups and thrusters. Your power measured over that time, we might get to something here. And then you find something that you're not so good at. Let's say a snatch. There you go. So if technique is not an issue, you find something that you're not so good at, you might plot that kind of here. Then you find something that you're really good at, a 400-meter run. You might plot that up here. And gradually, everything that you do can be plotted onto a chart like this. And what we would find is, over time, you would begin to get this kind of curve over time. You might find that you have an endurance bias. So you're someone that prefers these longer endurance pieces. And so you're mapping yourself up here. And so your curve might actually be a bit flatter. Your back squat's not very good. Your deadlift's not very heavy. So it might be a flatter curve. But essentially, everything that is within this space is your health and fitness. This is your fitness. This is what we measured, okay? Everything that is above it would then be your potential, okay? So if I can increase my 1 rep max and get an increased power output, I change my curve. I'm starting to make my curve bigger. If I can improve my Fran time, if I can improve my 5K run, if I can improve my marathon run, I now have a bigger curve, there's more space, I'm a fitter individual. And so we can actually start to measure your fitness over time. And then the practical application is how that then transfers over to things like your longevity of life, your strength for life, and we'll come on to the 5 buckets of death in a moment, the morbid topic that I like talking about. But what we're trying to do is increase this across different time domains and different modalities. So this is not sprint, 400-meter run, 5K run, marathon run, because then I'm going to give you a back squat. It's going to be down here, and that's going to drop your chart down. So we're looking at a wide variety of modalities, and how fit are you on all of those things that I give you. So this is our marathon runner that does a sub 2-hour time. Their power output's probably up here for a 2-hour marathon run. But if I ask them to do a 1 rep max back squat, they're going to be quite flat in that curve. So are they necessarily fit over broad time domains and different modalities? And that's what we believe creates the best fitness as you get older and as you age. Questions? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Your body learns to break that down. There are some things that genetically you cannot control. I know you, Claudia, you're very explosive. So you might have faster twitch fibers, which means that you're up here, you're super explosive, good back squat, good deadlift, all of those things. I ask you to go for a 10K run. You give me the finger and tell me that I'm not doing it. So your body genetically might be made up of more fast twitch fibers, but what I can teach you to do is expose you to more slow, steady running, build that volume over time, and that means that your body gets more efficient at breaking down lactate. We do actually know that your body can try and then prioritize building other twitch fibers over time, but genetically, some people will go one way or the other. For those that go to the CrossFit Games, often it is because of their genetics. They have a really good mix of everything. They're super explosive, but if I ask them to do a half marathon run, they just do it because genetically they are made up of various different fiber types that allow them to do that. Does that answer your question? It's a cop-out really, isn't it? But yes, you can train yourself to do it, but you just got to put yourself into that uncomfortable situation where you do stuff that you just don't like doing. Go on, girl. Nice. Very good. How's your training going for that? Let me get into the honesty. Yeah, good. Any other questions?
So is that part of the way you set goals?
Yeah. Yeah, but then does depend on, are you ever going to do a 4-hour run? Like, do I need to even train for that? There will potentially just be this, like, I might go for a 4-hour walk with a pack on or something like that, and I can still measure power output from that. But I think there'll be a limit to how far that goes, unless you have a preference to achieve a full distance Ironman or a cycle from London to Paris, those kind of things. But yeah, like an easy way to go. I've plotted everything on my graph. See this thing down here? This is what I really need to work on to improve my fitness overall.
How do you measure that objectively, right? So take the 1 rep max back squat as an example.
Mm-hmm.
How do you measure your power output on that? Because
You would take your weight, your body weight, the distance that you moved the bar. So that's your distance. So if I have the bar on my back and I squat 1 meter with the bar, it's moved 1 meter. That's my power. So I've got my force is the loading of the barbell. The distance is it moved 1 meter. How long did it take you in order to do it? 1, 2 seconds. That is essentially kind of your power output. Yeah, yeah. So therefore, if your loading goes up and you can complete that in the same time frame, you've technically got fitter. So that's where it would plot up on the chart. Yeah. Does that make sense? Yeah. And the same if I asked you to do a 10 rep max or a 50 rep max, whatever it might be. Yeah. The example I use with things like this calculation are we have a large cohort of members that are just like, I freaking hate running. I'm not a very good runner. But actually, you can lose sight of, if you're heavier, then your force is actually higher. So yes, you might run 2 minutes slower than everybody else in class, but if you weighed more and did it, yes, 2 minutes slower, you might actually be working out that your power output's higher than them because they're running at 10 kilos lighter than you, so their force is lower. So don't necessarily assume that because you come in 2 minutes later, you're less fit. You would have to do your calculation to do it. And this is where AI can come in. Like basically go, right, I'm 90 kilos. I'm comparing that to a 60 kilo person. They ran it in 10 minutes. I ran it in 15 minutes. Who's fitter? And it will do the calculations for you. Just because I was 5 minutes slower might mean that I'm not necessarily less fit than that person. I think those calculations would be quite close. So you can start to map that out. And that's why lots of things have weight classes and stuff like that. An Olympic lifter that weighs Lasha Talakahadze, who's the strongest snatch, clean and jerk in the world. He snatches 205 kilos, might even be more than that. He weighs 168 kilos in body weight. So how can you fairly go, well, there's a 70 kilo guy and a 160 kilo guy, you're going to try and lift in the same competition? It isn't fair because weight moves weight. So yeah, body weight can make a big difference there. Does that answer your question, Han? Yeah?
yeah.
Yeah. Do you have any more? No? Okay, all right. So we're going to move on to some more of the science. So what we kind of see is that high intensity essentially triggers a hormonal response. You start to like burn some more calories because of an elevated heart rate and slightly elevated metabolism over more hours in the day. We start to see things like growth hormone, higher testosterone rates, things like that with the higher level, higher intensity exercise, far beyond if you just did slow and steady all the time. And that's typically why we would see an increase in muscle tissue if you employ some high intensity exercise, those short bursts, those sprint levels. And so again, coming back to our in-body scan, we want to make sure that you're growing your muscle tissue over time so that you can afford to be losing it when you get to your 70s, 80s, 90s. If you're continuing to train, great. You might even just maintain that number. But we want to make sure that you maintain or at least grow some muscle mass to make sure you're less frail as you age. Then we can measure it. I've spoken about this already. So you can tangibly map all of your exercises. We don't give you one of these, we give you an app. You log all your scores on the app. You do a workout like Cindy today, 5 pull-ups, 10 push-ups, 15 squats. First time you did it, you got 10 rounds. This time you did it, you did 15 rounds. It was 20 minutes for both of those workouts. You did a lot more reps the second time, therefore your power output's improved. You have increased your fitness. So it is measurable. And then what we're looking at is kind of the functional transfer of that fitness. Coming back to what fitness used to be, where you had bodybuilding and running separately. Greg Glassman's analogy of this is, you imagine that you have a friend that's stuck under a load of stones and boulders. You don't have the luxury to go, I'll lift one, then take a 1 minute rest. Then I'll go back in, I'll lift two. The guy's going to die. You need the cardiovascular element to try and save his life. You have to lift weight under a high heart rate in order to try and help that person. And so that's kind of the practical application of what we're looking for. We don't want to just separate out the cardiovascular aspect and the weightlifting aspect. We, on very rare occasions and hopefully less extreme circumstances, will need a high heart rate as we carry something. I always think of like my daughter when she wants to be carried and I've got a scooter, a helmet, a bag. Like, oh I can feel my heart rate's coming up, but she will not walk on the floor. It's those kind of situations where I'm thankful that I do some form of training. So practical real world examples are cool. I spoke about the hopper model. I've kind of already gone there with that. Now, moving on to your real world practical applications of this. In the CrossFit journal, Greg Glassman come up with the sickness, wellness, fitness continuum. And you can essentially map all of these onto a chart. I could probably draw one of these. In fact, I'll do it underneath, just so I don't have to rub that out. So it looks like this. You've got sickness here, you've got wellness here, you've got fitness here. And you can take any of your measurements. So your blood pressure, your cholesterol levels, your glucose levels, all of the stuff that you see on the board here, but you can also then start to take things like your run times, your 100-meter sprint, 5K, 10K. You could take your squatting, back squat, front squat, overhead squat, your deadlift numbers, and you can plot it on what we would perceive to see as the fittest. So this would be the best scores in the world, even for specialists. So I don't know what the heaviest squat in the world is, but heaviest deadlift's like 500 and something kilos now. So that would be right over here, okay? Average human being will probably be closer to here. Those that cannot deadlift an empty bar, I would probably classify them as sick because they can't move in the right functional pattern. What we would typically see is if your blood pressure is poor, your cholesterol levels are poor, your glucose levels are poor, the likelihood is your body fat is also higher. You can't squat, you can't deadlift, you can't really move functionally without getting out of breath. So we would term you sick. There tends to be not necessarily just a correlation, but kind of a sequence of one is not caused by the other. This is where you don't focus on your nutrition or your exercise. You start to see one, then the other. So these happen as a byproduct of not looking after your food and exercise. I think so, yeah. Yeah, certainly the percentages are, yeah. Yeah, the numbers will be different dependent on your gender, particularly things like body fat mass. But you could take anything that you could tangibly measure and put it on a chart like this. And you're not always going to be over here for everything. The guy that has the heaviest squat in the world will probably not have the best 5K run time. So they might be well here, fit for some other things, maybe even sick for one or two things. But then very much like this chart, you start to look at my average. I might plot here on the chart. So I'm doing pretty well. And so the goal is that you try and improve your numbers, both in the gym. We should then see a correlation between you looking after your nutrition and your exercise to what you might measure with your GP. That's typically what we would see. There might be genetic reasons why that doesn't happen. But if your genetics determine that your cholesterol's not great, we might still see that your blood pressure's amazing, your body fat's amazing, etc. So yes, you might measure here for your cholesterol, but for everything else you're here, your average is far much higher. And then we kind of move in towards what, therefore, your risk of chronic disease is. And we would typically see, if you sit this side of the chart, the likelihood of early death is much lower. And that's actually the bigger picture for us. When you guys come in and join, we're hoping that you have in the back of your minds that You want to live a longer life. And yes, a byproduct of training and exercising and eating well means that you get more muscle mass. You start to look better naked. But actually, the bigger picture is you probably live longer as a byproduct of that. And if you were to ask your coaches why they do what they do, it's because of this, not because of the way that you might look as a byproduct of it. And that's how you start to see differences between really good coaches and coaches that don't care. Coaches that don't care will want you to get abs and don't really give a shit about all of this kind of stuff. I know for a fact that the guys that work here, this is their main aim. We want you to all live a long and healthy life and essentially be able to wipe your ass for the rest of your life. That's the goal. Yeah. So I've kind of explained this again already. I like this quote. The same program that builds an elite athlete also prevents and reverses chronic disease. So elite level athletes, if they were to walk into our gym, would do the same programming as you. It would just look different. It differs by kind. So we would provide you scaling options. We might scale them up rather than down. So the workouts might look very similar on paper, but if we take something like today's workout, that 5 pull-ups, 10 push-ups, 15 squats, they're going to be hitting 30 rounds of that. They do the same workout as you. But we still have people, if you don't mind me saying, like Jill, that might do a push-up on a box. She is still pushing, extending the elbow. The stimulus is the same. You're still working hard, I hope. Yes, good. So it differs by degree, not kind of workout. Okay, you'll still do the same workout as you. And so what that would elicit is a drop in things like blood pressure, increase in good cholesterol, lower body fat, higher bone density, improved back squat, improved deadlift, improved 5K time, whatever it might be. And again, we start to then move over to the right-hand side of our sickness, wellness, fitness continuum. We would also likely see that you begin to move up. Therefore, your fitness improves over time. Yeah, that's the bigger aim. Okay, moving on to the morbid. 5 buckets of death. I really like this. I know Usma likes this as well because she's NHS. So Greg Glassman describes that there are 5 causes of death, and he calls them the icks. You have a chronic, you have a microbic, you have a, I can't remember off the top of my head, kinetic, toxic, microbic, genetic. Now, 80% of the world deaths are caused by chronic disease. The amazing thing is that these are willful behavioral patterns. If you decide to eat a cookie every day of your life and therefore increase your risk of high blood pressure, high cholesterol, higher body fat, etc., you made that willful behavioral decision. You look at it, John. Put that fucking cookie down. It is also 86% of healthcare spend. So most people that we see in hospital made a conscious decision to do something that put them there in the first place. The only known cure for chronic disease is diet and exercise. It is the only known cure. If you go to hospital, they will try and improve your symptoms of those things, but they are not curing whatever you have. You will need to go home and eat some vegetables, eat some nuts and seeds, some meat, some protein. You will need to move in order to try and reduce your body fat, improve your blood pressure, and reduce your risk of these. Your visceral fat number on your in-body scan tells us your risk of this. Yeah? Now, there are other things that are just to do with shit luck. You were born with cystic fibrosis. There's nothing you could do about it. It was your genetics that determined that. Toxic, you get bitten by a snake, poisoned in some way, kind of most of the time, not your fault. Kinetic, you're in a car accident, fall off a cliff, whatever it might be, really shit luck. Microbic is COVID-19, flu, all those other things that we probably see in the NHS. Now, one thing that was really highlighted during COVID-19 was that the microbic aspect of COVID-19 started to increase and affect the number of people that died because of chronic disease. So it's almost like COVID-19 started a trash can fire, and everybody that had really high blood pressure, poor cholesterol, high body fat, the likelihood is they were dying from a microbic disease. Is that a fair assumption? Am I making a fair assumption there? That if you were really fucking unhealthy in the first place, you'd probably die if you caught COVID-19. Whereas if you were fit, healthy, low body fat, sat on the right-hand side of this fitness continuum, your chances of fighting that were much higher. And so your correlation of death was lower. So actually, if we can reduce the impact of this, the chances of you dying from these things is also lower. If I take a really fit, healthy individual and they are in a car accident, I would argue that they're less likely to die compared to someone that has high blood pressure, high cholesterol, high body fat, etc. So we now know that the things that keep you out of this bucket might actually positively impact your chances of surviving if one of these things was to happen to you. So we're positively affecting both sides. The key is these people put themselves there. It's a willful behavioral thing. And so when you walk in through the door, we are trying to take you and push you away from it as much as we possibly can. Again, that is the bigger picture of why we do what we do. Make sense? I know it sounds morbid, but it is actually quite profound when you realize that you'll probably die from one of these 5 things. I keep my fingers crossed and it's not that it was just you had bad luck. There's an equation that is your health is your risk of chronic disease, 75% of it is risk of chronic disease, the other 25% is your luck. And that essentially is your health. So if you can keep your risk of chronic disease low, then the likelihood is we want to try and keep you towards this side. And hopefully none of this happens, so you live a really long life. Yeah? Any questions so far?
So apart from visceral fat on the in-body score, what's the other metrics that sit around that?
To do with these?
Yeah, to avoid you getting
Everything.
disease.
Yep. If you score really low on your muscle mass number, I would then argue that you can't sit down, stand up independently without aid. That means you probably live in a chair. That means that your valves don't work because you don't move. Your risk of dying from heart disease is much higher. So if I can see someone with a higher muscle mass number, the likelihood is they move well, they eat well, they sleep well, probably. So almost everything on your in-body scan, if it measures well, and that's why the number is really cool in the in-body scan, because if you score 90 points, the chances are your risk of dying from this is much lower. If you score 55 points, you probably have something that's here. We want to try and then push you towards those higher numbers. So actually, almost everything. P.
Where does heart rate and heart rate variability fit into?
Heart rate variability can be very genetically driven as well. So you would need to work out what your baseline is. So there's no right or wrong number for people, but resting heart rate you would see within this. So if somebody had a resting heart rate of 105, they are also likely having high blood pressure, high poor cholesterol. They are unfit, as we would see it. So we would want to get them to eat better, train better, reduce their resting heart rate in order to reduce their risk of chronic disease. So we're looking at kind of heart health there. And if I come back to those 10 physical skills, we are looking at these 2 primarily. Resting heart rate we would see lower if you have good cardiovascular endurance. So improving that would lower your resting heart rate. No, you would have quite a natural like low resting heart rate anyway, because it is not necessarily genetic. It will be in a way, but like genetically you wouldn't have a resting heart rate at 90 and that be healthy for you. For lots of people it will kind of fluctuate between 45 to 70 as a pretty good base level, a pretty fit level. I'd say anything that exceeds like 80 as a sleeping resting heart rate is probably a bit too high. Therefore, we'll try and improve your cardiovascular fitness. Yeah?
So would you recommend that people understand that their resting heart rate is
Yeah, but yeah, definitely check it regularly. But all of our fitness tech isn't necessarily as accurate as it could possibly be. So that's why measuring things like your sleeping resting heart rate can be the best way. And you just look at trends. Even things like Apple Watches will measure your resting heart rate if you wear it when you sleep. And you're not doing any exercise during that time. So as it measures it throughout the night, that's kind of the number that you would end up taking. But yeah, a good correlation between a good level of fitness and resting heart rate, probably more towards that cardiovascular endurance. If somebody's got a really good 1 rep max back squat, I don't know whether their resting heart rate would also be good. I think it's probably more correlated to endurance training. Yeah. Any other questions? Okay, so I wanted to, we obviously have other methodologies that we do here, and just talk about the growth of Hyrox a little bit as well. And founded in 2017, like participation numbers are crazy predicted for this year. Just going to show you this. 1.3 million plus competitors predicted for this season, which is huge, actually like double what was last year. And the best thing that that Hyrox has done is make that functional fitness almost measurable still, but really accessible to everybody. And we know that there's that taboo that you walk into a CrossFit gym, and if you'd walked in today, you've got people swinging on the bar, doing squats quick, lots of push-ups. So somebody that's never ever trained before, walking in and looking at that and going, this is not for me. I am not fit enough to do that. Now, we know that we can change it, but sometimes it takes us to tell that story of how it might change for people. That's why social media exists. What Hyrox did so well and what CrossFit missed out on was being able to make this measurable. So you come away from your Hyrox race or simulation by going, right, I've got a time. That is your measure of fitness. Your power output could be measured on everything that you do here. That would probably correlate to your time. You would then go away, work on what your worst time was on whatever station it was, and they provide you with those if you log in online. And then you go away and you work on your weakness. Come back into this. Sandbag lunges is all the way down here. Work on your sandbag lunges. Fuck me, my time's got better. That's your correlation. I've improved my fitness by working on my weakness over time. And it made it so accessible. So most people would look at that. Yes, if you hate running, you probably hate Hyrox. It is half of it, but really helps you with your strength, your overall cardiovascular fitness. And if I asked all of you to go onto a ski erg, you can pull the handles. Doesn't matter how fast or whatever, you could do it. You could do the same for a rower. Sled push and pull are weight-based, but I don't think I've ever heard of anybody that goes to Hyrox, does the open category and went, just couldn't do it. They've set the weights at quite accessible levels, unless you sign up for the wrong category, which does happen. Even things like burpee broad jumps, get on the ground and then just give me a jump forward. If you can do that, you can do a Hyrox race. And that goes all the way down to our wall balls. They don't go, right, you're missing depth like you would in a CrossFit competition. No rep, no rep, no rep, no rep, no rep. Doesn't count. Keep going, keep going. You're there 2 hours later, still trying to get a bloody wall ball. They stick a box behind you. Touch the box, touch the target. Now we've made it more accessible if you can't hit the depth. So there are, hugely accessible races around the world and over 100 events this year, which is awesome. And I think it's given people a real community and a purpose to applying what they might learn in a CrossFit gym. I think I would guess that most people doing a Hyrox race have at some point experienced a CrossFit gym, or they currently train within a CrossFit gym. But they might be more biased towards the endurance aspect of training and enjoy that more, which is cool. You're still improving that cardiovascular fitness as well, and strength, because you still got to be pretty strong to push these for a good time. I kind of touched on that shortly, but essentially looking at the difference in the two formats here. So it has a really high completion rate if you do Hyrox. Competitions vary dependent on the difficulty of the category that you go in, but you enter online competitions, there's only like 10 people that qualify, so your completion success rate is actually a lot lower in things like CrossFit. And yeah, you kind of got that event and that race that you're training for and that purpose towards it. So we do have those in CrossFit, which might be local competitions and small events and things like that. But it's nothing that CrossFit will ever compete with around High Rocks. It's created such an amazing community to be able to practically apply your fitness. Okay, what this means for you? Community. Power of community is hopefully what eventually kind of keeps you here and keeps you going. Shared suffering in what you do, whether that's High Rocks, gymnastics, weightlifting, etc. Everything is scalable. Never ever come in thinking that you're being a burden on your coaches. I've said to so many people that talk to me about injuries that they have and stuff, that when you come to me with an injury, it keeps me on my toes. My job would be so fucking boring if everybody just come in, they squatted perfectly, they all did butterfly pull-ups, everybody did perfect push-ups. Just be sitting there like, oh, what should I do with myself? Whereas actually, somebody comes in with a rib cage injury, I'm like, right, this is going to keep me on my toes. They can't pull, they can't push. What are we going to find for them today? So never ever come into class thinking, right, I'm going to be a burden on them. We always want you to come in, and it is our job as coaches to scale you as much as we possibly can. You're accountable to your community, to your coaches, the leaderboard that's on your member app, etc. That really keeps you accountable. And then apply your fitness in some way, shape, or form. It's really cool when people put on the community group that they did their first ever 10K run or 5K run or ran full stop. That's the first time I've done it in however many years. Or they did their first High Rocks, even if it took you 2 hours. It's really cool hearing people go, I've never thought I would have done this thing. All I did was go to the gym and now I can do it. And those are really cool stories for us to hear. And again, really applies to that bigger picture. That comes back to, you should therefore lower your risk of chronic disease. You live a longer life, but you at the time think, I did my first High Rocks. If I was to measure your blood pressure kind of a year before, I bet it was worse than when you completed your High Rocks. And that's the bigger picture for us as coaches. Yeah? Any questions at all? John?
So when you do like the weight categories and powerlifting and all that, is there any way CrossFit does that? Because obviously I'm like 78 and the weight is like you're deadlifting like the 1.6K run you did, you're deadlifting 144.
Mm-hmm.
The bigger lads that'll
The bigger guys. How well do you do on a run and a push-up workout? You're very good at that, right? So you have your thing, you have your strength. They have their strength. It doesn't necessarily mean they're fitter than you. So you're working at your capacity, which might be a lower weight, but you have your strengths, they have their strengths. If we were to chart it on a graph, your fitness might be very similar. You might even be fitter than them. But if we were to weight class everything, logistically it'd be a nightmare. But we would then have to weight class your push-up workout. I'd have to add a vest onto you every time you do that workout. I'd have to make it fair for everybody if we were going to weight class it. So we'd have to try and find a way to make everyone completely even. Would that then really feel fair? So the weightlifter that weighs 90 kilos doing a 1 rep max back squat, we then have a run and push-up workout. I then say to you, John, I need you to weigh 90 kilos. Grab a vest, stick a really heavy vest on, let's go. You might not do so well in that workout anymore because you're weighed down by that. So yeah, I'd agree. It would be even, but what a logistical nightmare. To get everybody at the same body weight to do the workout, it just never would work. The easiest way to measure it is, what is your squat today? What is it in a month's time? What is it in a year's time? Is it improving? Then that's great. You're progressing your strength, therefore your fitness. Try not to compare yourself to other people. Is more the thing. Yeah. Yeah. Questions? Helen?
So if you've
I've got about 3 more minutes, by the way, just saying.
if your goal is around high rocks and on the endurance side of the scale,
Mhm.
how do you integrate CrossFit into your training where it's very short, high intensity workouts designed, as you said? How do you use CrossFit
I think that would be very dependent on the athlete. I would probably want to look at your stations and identify where you fell down on your scores. So was it your sled pull? Was it your sled push? Was it your row, ski, whatever it might be? It would be really dependent on those, because if it's your run, I don't think CrossFit's the right thing to do. So if your running's really strong, but it's some of the stations that you're weaker at, if your walking lunges is a big hole of yours, then doing some leg strength work in things like CrossFit classes, that higher intensity 10 rep max back squat, whatever it might be, I would argue would then correlate over to an improved walking lunge time, a sandbag walking lunge time when you do your high rocks. So it actually come down to what is it that the individual wants to work on. If it's running, I would argue if you want to get really good at high rocks, work on the running if that's your weakness. If it's not, and it's station based, then I think strength would be the better thing to work at, even if it's something like a row or a ski, because if I can make you stronger, your power output on that machine is going to be higher. But again, because it's more of an endurance race base, I don't want to affect your running time. So if I make you strong and heavy, coming back to what kind of John was mentioning, if that slows you down, I've actually negatively impacted it. So there is a balance there. Hopefully you see how that is really individual, and you can book in your scan and we can sit down and go through that if you want to show me all of those. Yeah. Any others?
How should we plan our week?
Don't. Routine is the enemy.
Okay.
Don't plan it. Just come in, do whatever is thrown in front of you. Let your coaches scale for you. We'll always have a stimulus, what it should feel like, what you want to get out of the session. You know, today's was I want you to do roughly 15 rounds there or thereabouts. If you got absolutely nowhere near and you were sat there just doing one push-up at a time, that's the wrong stimulus. If you're getting close to the numbers that we're looking for as coaches, you're using the right energy system, the time frame was about right, all of those kind of things, and then we plot your score on the chart. Next day you come in, 1 rep max back squat, whatever it might be. It's completely random. Our programming, if you look across the week, will go short workout, long workout, moderate workout, short again, but it will vary between weightlifting, gymnastics. Next Sunday, we have a 5K run. Sorry, Claudia. Okay. So those kind of things, like it's completely random. And we would never want you to go, it's pull-ups today. I'm going to go to that because I'm really good at it. What's the point? You're already like up here. You're working on a strength. I'd want you to develop your weaknesses instead. Yeah? Don't check the schedule. No. Georgie, last question and then I need to go. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a good question. Like if you are trying to get one specific thing and hone in on that thing, it's going to take homework to do. So whether that's just band pull aparts every day for months, it would make you stronger. If you were to just do classes, those things would incrementally improve over time. It's just the progression would be slower. So you would get better at pull-ups, but it might take you a year rather than 3 months if you just honed in on that one thing. So I think that's where Open Gym would come in. It is just like, do I really want that thing now, or am I happy for it to actually take a lot longer? If you're happy for it to take longer, class exposure would help that. But if you want it here and now, then Open Gym and accessory work and all that kind of stuff. Again, in-body time, come in, this is what I want, let's focus on that, and then I can help program for you, whatever it might be. Yeah, 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 absolutely. Your time frames would all vary. Hopefully the movements would still vary, mostly across the week, depending on what the injury was and things like that. But yeah. Okay. All right, guys. Thanks for coming. I hope you found it insightful. If you do have any questions, I'm going to post the video on YouTube anyway. Comment on the WhatsApp link, and then I can do a separate video answering some of the questions. So if anything comes to mind, then please let me know. Okay. Thank you for coming. If you don't mind sticking the chairs back for me, that would be great. Enjoy the rest of your weekend.